To be here with Sukui and Myra, and I hope that you guys will have lots and lots of questions for them, because although I have a set of questions and I'll be sharing some of my experiences and getting theirs as well, there's nothing like unexpected questions from the audience, right? Okay, now when we look at I think, you know, the time you start, when you start off to now, obviously there are many stages that we go through. And one of the, I guess, objectives we always look at within organizations is achievement of gender diversified workforce. It helps, as we shared this morning, helps corporate growth, it helps personal growth as well. And the ability to help other women or work with other women as well and men to realize talent and grow. So I think that, you know, when we look at both your organizations, so for example, you know, Myra, the General Electric Women's Network, that was created more than 20 years ago to attract, develop, inspire, and retain female professional talent across all the GE businesses, which, as we know, is across many different industries. And I think that included inspiring and sharing experiences, best practices, knowledge of successful women and role models inside of GE and to GE employees as well. And I think today you have more than 160 hubs, I believe, in 60 countries that helps women around the world. I think, Myra, you represent the healthcare group of GE, and I believe that that's quite a unique position because we shared this morning that women make a lot of decisions for health, not just their own, but for their children and their families as well. So I think what GE is doing actually to you know, I guess, develop effective solutions for women across healthcare is very inspiring. Maybe do you want to start by just sharing a little bit more about what GE is doing as part of that women's network?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yes, so as you explained, the Women's Network exists for a long time within the company and is still very alive and well. And sometimes we may think that progress doesn't go fast enough, right? Because we look at the statistics, the number of women in leadership positions, also across GE Healthcare and GE, which is never enough, right? We're not at 50%, so we're not there. So it's very easy to see what still needs to get done. But then, if you look back over what has happened over the past 20 years within the company, and you see sometimes some of the old information that gets found, and one example, I think, which is quite telling, is performance reviews. I actually saw some documentation from 20 years ago, which was shared by one of her senior female executives, where her pre-printed performance review only had "he" in there. And her manager had actually made the effort to cross that out every single time and put "she." But it says a lot. Nowadays, in GE, we couldn't even imagine that that would happen, and that would be a pre-printed form. So a lot of progress has been made, but still a lot of work to be done. And we have a lot of hubs in many different countries. Whenever I travel throughout the region, Southeast Asia, Korea, or Australia, New Zealand, doesn't matter where or which market, I make sure we pull the Women's Network together, and we will help by mentoring, coaching, and also sponsoring women for career advancement.
Excellent. So, Suki, from a DBS perspective, I understand DBS, you know, you have a very strong meritocracy and best person, you know, for the job kind of policy. I think, you know, you have your policy of diversity and inclusion. More than, I think, 55% of your workforce and more than 1/3 of your senior management are female. I think you also have 30% of the group management committee as female as well. And your diversity policy requires female representation on your board. January this year, you were one of only 6 companies in Asia, excluding Japan, and among 104 companies in the world to be recognized in the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, right? Maybe you want to just share some background of, I guess, how did you guys get there, or where are you guys at now for that one?
So DBS is a company that has always, I think, been very inclusive, and that's why I think if you look at it, this year is the 3rd event. The first year, I think we had one of our business heads, Jeanette Wong, who spoke at this panel. Last year, we had another business head, Sushan, who spoke at this event. So myself and my CEO, Piyush, says, you know, we're actually run by women. But jokes aside, in the 20-member management committee, we actually have 7 women leaders, and I think every person, right? I mean, is picked for what they do best in their role. And I think if you look at the sort of a bit lower level, about 55% of our people at the senior level are actually women. So we have this culture where I think we are gender blind. We just promote people based on what they bring to the job. So I think we're very fortunate. And the other thing is, you'd find that women typically step off either sort of in their childbearing years when family commitments actually take priority, or sometimes a bit at the sort of the ED near MD level where they need to make time for their sort of growing up children. So we actually have a very a policy which encourages women to keep on working. So we are quite open to sort of half-day arrangements, working from home if your job sort of allow it. And that allows women to stay in the workforce for a lot longer, and therefore they have an opportunity to actually get up the ladder. Maybe in the sort of when your kids are very young, you slow down a little bit, but you know that you're in the workforce and you have a chance to catch up. Yeah.
So that's, for the organizations, but I think what we're really interested about in this session is, the personal experiences as well. This morning we talked about how women have to juggle so many things. I mean, the office is one, work is one, home. So if I look back at a typical week, it normally starts at 5:30, 6, either you're catching a flight or you're sending the kids to school, and then we go to office. You're lucky if you spend 3 days here or weekends here. So would love to hear what a typical, I know there's no such thing as a typical week, but maybe what did last week look like for each one of you?
Sure, I can give a little bit. Indeed, it starts at 6 a.m. because that's when my kids have to get up, and we need to get them ready for school to catch the school bus. That is if I'm here in Singapore for that day, and then usually it depends on whether I actually have to travel to the airport or I'm at home. I try to use those early hours in the morning to actually do some thinking, reading. Because that's the time I have for that before the day starts, which is usually filled with meetings, meetings with my team, my leadership team, customers, channel partners. If I'm traveling, that is usually because I try to maximize the time that I'm away to use it as best as possible, so that I can return home on time to be back for the weekend to spend with my family. So when I'm traveling, it is really a completely packed schedule from morning to evening, mainly visiting customers, spending time with the commercial teams in the different countries. But the thinking time is the one that I guard very carefully. I think also one thing that I've really I think since the past couple of years have paid more attention to is that I start out as I plan my week or my days that I have enough sleep, because without that I cannot function. I know there are people who can operate on 4 hours a night. I wish I could, but I cannot. I have to take that as the first limitation, that I need enough sleep in order to function, and also make sure that I take care of my exercise. And that may sometimes mean that all I can do is take a walk for 20 minutes, or whether I can actually have the time to make it to the gym. Those are two things that I need to be able to keep up my stamina and my health to do what I need to do.
Excellent. Sophie, what about you?
So I'm actually past the stage where I have to wake up kids. My kids, I have 4 children, but they are like adults, and I'm a grandma, right? So it's a slightly different phase. So my kids are 32, 30, 28, 26. So I actually have gone through the period when they are like 2, 4, 6, 8, where a lot of juggling happens. But nowadays, I guess the children have all grown up. If you ask me for my schedule, I get into office quite early. I get in at about 7:30 each day, and typically have sort of a mix of internal, external meetings. You asked me last week, we just announced results, so it will be meeting with the media, the analysts, meeting with investors, doing staff briefings, and this morning meeting with rating agencies, big investors, and I just came back after spending 2 days in Beijing, trying to keep myself up to speed with a lot of what's happening in China. It is a big market. What's happening on the IT front, the artificial intelligence front, the trade tensions between US and China, geopolitics, etc. So very interesting, very full schedule, but very enriching. And of course, weekends, try and keep it for the family, keep it for my grandchildren, and if I'm not traveling, yeah.
So what are the few, like Myra said she can't do without her sleep and hopefully exercise. What are the 1 or 2 things you can't do without?
Oh, I need my sleep too. That's absolutely critical. The fortunate thing is I actually get to sleep quite easily, and even if I'm traveling, I actually sleep quite well.
Yes, that's a trick. You've got to be able to sleep anywhere, right? Great. Now, I mean, with all of these, some things I find quite similar. Like we all have really early starts today. I have a 6 a.m. as well. I don't have to wake up my kids now. They're teenagers, so if they don't wake up on their own, that's too bad. They're late for school. I've gotten over that. It's not my fault. But I think that having to do work, meetings, travel, we sometimes struggle. Well, I at least have struggled. So I'll give you an example of a scenario where. We were living in Sydney, and at that time, my kids were like 3 and 4 years old, and I was traveling. So I was somewhere in Asia, and my husband's he was helping. We took turns, right, to travel and stuff. But I get a call, I don't get a call. So the next morning, I'm calling the house to find out what's going on, and no one's answering the phone. So I'm thinking so why isn't anyone answering the phone? Then I find out later that day, at the end of that day, that there was kind of an accident in the house, and my husband had burnt his hand trying to make milk for the kids. I mean, doing his best. And they had to call an ambulance to go, and he's there with a 3 and a 4-year-old kid and a burnt hand. And all I could think of was oh my God, did this happen because whatever? You start thinking of a lot of reasons. And that was really tough for me. So I don't know, when you're going through all these, have you faced any such situations, or how did you cope with that? No situation.
If you're asking about do I ever feel guilty towards my kids or my family, I think if I give in to that would be quite difficult. So. And the way I look at it is, part of what the fact that I have this job does is support the family, right? So, so there's a reason for it. I'm not going on a shopping trip or a hobby spree or or something like that. So I think that to keep that in front of yourself, right? Because through that you're contributing to your family, right? And then I think the other thing is that I've learned that has helped me a lot is give up on some stuff, right, in the house. There are things that, because of we have great help at home, but they may not do things the way you do it yourself, or your husband does things in a different way than you would do it yourself. Let it go, right? Don't try to also control all that, right? Because then it becomes really difficult and also very frustrating for either your partner or the help you have at home to play the role that they would like to play and are doing. So I think that's so you have to really make sure that you spend time on what's really important also with your children and with your spouse, right? And that's the quality time.
Absolutely right. I mean, go to certain homes, and the homes are perfect. And I'm like, yeah, my house is never going to look perfect. If you come, it'll look perfect if you tell me you're coming in an hour, because I'll make sure it's perfect in that hour. But if you just dropped in, it'll look a bit of a mess. But what about yourself, Sokwee?
Yeah, I think we go through periods like that. And I guess I was crazy enough not to have a helper when I had 2 young children. And you have those moments of guilt, especially when I bring them back every night. They were with my mom in the day, and the very young one at 1 year old fell, and I think he went into sort of some fits, and it's like, oh, what have I done? Am I juggling too many things? And had to be sort of hospitalized, and you keep asking, is it time to quit? Is it time to maybe sort of give more attention to the kids? So I went through a phase like that. But I think, thank God, you know, he was well, but I think that caused me to reflect. And I think one of the things that women need to just, I feel, is just get your priorities right at every stage, because you just can't do everything. And so I think things that can be outsourced, you would want to outsource, and sort of just keep the things that you really want to protect, right? The time with your children. And so I kind of so I outsource, for example, marketing, and so I don't do marketing. My sister does it for me. I don't do sort of a lot of things. If I can, I try and make sure there's somebody who is more capable, so that you kind of just focus on the things that matter. I think it's the same for work. It's the same for the home.
Yeah, and something that I'd like to add there, because this is a question I often get from women as they're thinking about, well, I have a young family now, and am I going to take on a role with more responsibility, lead more people? Is that what I should do, and to balance? And one of the things that I've learned looking back is that the bigger your responsibility, the bigger your leadership role is in the teams you lead, the more control you get over your agenda. And if you plan well, there's a lot that you can manage. So yes, there will be times where, you know, I have missed things that my kids were doing that I would have loved to be at because of work commitments. But I would say probably 80% of those, I was actually there because I was able to manage my agenda around that. And I think that's something not to be underestimated as you grow in your career and you look at different opportunities in front of you.
So Queen, you have, I think, the longest career among the three of us. So it would be great to hear some reflections, you know, from the time you first. How did you get to where you are today? If you were to tell us, you know, in a very quick snapshot, your kind of, you know, your story, I guess, right? Both career, but also personal issues and challenges and enablers that brought you to this point.
So I think I've been very fortunate. So I'm 35 years with DBS. So DBS gave me a scholarship, and I stayed on 35 years. So I've been the CFO for the last 10 years. And when I look back earlier, the first 25 years, I'll say the first half, you're just sort of getting to sort of know very different aspects of the bank. And then in the next 12 years or so, I was actually in a sort of transforming sort of risk management role. And I became the head of risk before I became the CFO. So what I think is actually helpful as I look back on my career journey, and which we encourage our young people as well, and I tell the same thing to my children who are now working adults, that actually you don't really know yourself that well. Neither do you really know your strengths. And it's actually by trying sort of, by working in different roles that you probably get a better appreciation of what you do well. The feedback mechanism is stronger. You find that you actually can do so much better, probably with much less effort compared to a colleague, and that's probably an area of strength for you. So, well, many years ago, it was not so fashionable to sort of do job rotation. I was very fortunate because our chairman was part of the civil service that actually believed in rotating people. So I actually got a lot of rotation when I started out my career. So I asked not to be in a frontline role so that I could sort of have more time for the family. But I was in a middle office role, and I felt like it gave me a lot of insights into what connects a front office and the back office in my middle office role, and how I can actually enable the business in a middle office role. And then I went on to sort of do the bigger sort of finance areas where you actually can have a bird's eye view of the entire organization, looking at budgets, looking at capital allocation, and then I move on to do a strategy and planning function, where you begin to look at investor relations in terms of you write a lot of speeches for your bosses. So it's actually very varied. But I think at some point in time, if you ask yourself, what am I looking out for in my next career move? Am I am I gaining sort of new skills? Maybe a new product skill, maybe working in a different geography, and maybe even sort of adjacent roles, right? So we encourage people to think about new roles. Sometimes it's about building new network contacts, right? So being in a different role enables you, for example, if you're in a customer-facing role, then you build certain networks. If you are in a support role, you build other sort of contacts in that space. And then you gain management breadth. And that is when you actually begin to see things from an organization perspective, whether it's in the area of capital allocation, in the areas of strategy. All those are actually very different routes. And if you're able to connect a lot of these dots, then you actually become very valuable to your organization. So that was kind of like phase one. And then phase two, I guess in those days, risk management in banking was totally new. Nowadays, it's like a master's program, but at the time, nobody was doing sort of quantifiable risk management, systematic risk management thinking. And I was very privileged because in my corporate planning role, I actually got to hire all the consultants, start up, project manage all the projects. And at the end of all these sort of project management, they asked me, would you like to become the market risk head? And sort of that took my career into risk management. And it was very hard for me. I was supervising people who had PhDs, who were quants, and they probably think, well, the boss is not very smart, can't understand half of these things, right? So you have to be very thick-skinned. And you said, well, I'm the boss, so I will actually learn the language. I may not be as good as a PhD, but I remembered getting university professors to actually come in the evenings and coach sort of a group of us so that we actually get up to speed with the terminology and things like that. It's hard work, but I think it's needful, right? So if you want to be a role, you do it seriously. And then I decided to take the risk management exams. And my people saying, really? Do you really want to do that? I mean, probably they think you'll fail, you know. You know, the other banks, their risk management heads are all going to be invigilators. You know, what are you going to be invigilator instead? I said, no, I'm going to take the exam. And if I don't make it, I will retake it, right? I mean, it's kind of having that attitude to learn. And I passed. So you gain certain credibility to actually lead the function. And I guess it's not just about quants in risk management, although that was the rage of the day, but actually it's taking a very holistic view. Today, risk management encompasses cyber risk, anti-money laundering, sales practices, much wider topics. And the sort of the exposure I had in risk over the 10 years gave me sort of a lot of confidence to manage a sort of unknown environment, new risk types. And it's also the reason why it opened up the door for me to actually be invited to a lot of boards. So I actually sort of then got invited to join the Inland Revenue Board because they wanted somebody who understood risk. And then I was invited to the stock exchange, the SGX board, and I chaired the risk committee because they wanted a practitioner who understood risk. So I think when you go to sort of new areas, you had to start everything from scratch, hire people, build systems. But I think what you gain is something very valuable. And if you can be in the sort of the space early enough, you become a leader. You're recognized as a leader in that space. And then it opens up a lot of opportunities for you. And right now, I think for very young people, a stint and a knowledge of technology and how it's going to impact all your jobs is something that I think is extremely important, is very new, but it's probably worthwhile investing your time, even if you're not a techie. But I think understanding design thinking, understand how artificial intelligence can actually change all our jobs, it's critical. So I'm not an expert, but I make it my business to go and learn, and every day I'm learning new things so that it can also transform DBS and actually help us to connect better with ecosystem partners out there, and then sort of carve out a niche for our digitalization strategy. So a very, very long answer, but I hope it's helpful.
No, absolutely. I think, the key takeaways from that for me was really doing a variety of roles. I think continuous learning that you build on that, and I like what you said about being thick-skinned. Myra, what about you? What's your journey like?
Yeah, so I have been with GE for 23 years. GE actually offered me a job before I graduated, and I didn't really know much about the company. I studied in the Netherlands, where I'm from originally. GE is not very well known there, and I thought, okay, you know what, let me just start there and then I'll see. So 23 years later. And if I look back at the 23 years, I worked and lived on 3 different continents. I worked in 3 radically different industries. Started in the chemical industry. I worked in the movie industry, believe it or not, for a couple of years, and majority of my career in the healthcare industry, but always GE. But then again, some of these businesses had a very different culture than other parts of GE. But also exposure to different functions. I started on financial management program, accounting, finance, then moved into manufacturing, and then later on to commercial roles. So I've had the opportunity to see so many parts of the business and be exposed to many different parts as well, which now helps tremendously in my current role. But I think what is critical is that I'm lucky enough that I chose to start with GE at the time, because my experience has been with the company that there is a tremendous willingness to take bets on people who have the capabilities, who are interested, who are willing to learn, and to give people opportunities. And as you can imagine, moving from finance to manufacturing to commercials, it means also that you start in jobs that you don't have the complete filled out resume for to the dot to exactly do that job. And there's a lot of learning that's required. But you get into those positions because there are skills that you have and things that you know how to do well that you can apply and be successful in those roles while you learn everything else that there is to learn. And very early on my career, as I had the opportunity to work in the US for about 6 years, when I started there, I went there as a financial analyst in one of our factories for the healthcare business. And as I was working very closely with the production teams, and I'm fascinated about what they were doing, working with the plant manager, and one day the plant manager asked me, he said, "You don't want to stick around in finance, do you?" I thought, well, maybe not. He said, "So, I think I have something for you." So literally from one day to the next, made me production manager within the factory. I was 28 years old, I had 80 technicians, 5 engineers, had to do part of the MRI equipment production. No idea how to make an MRI, and I'm not an engineer. And that was probably the toughest leadership experience that I've had in my career, because you can imagine they were looking at me like, what is this girl going to do here, right? So, and you know, I had to rely on the team, right? Because I couldn't tell them how to do their jobs. So, so that was difficult. But that has helped me tremendously, and subsequently, when I was just over 30 years old, I became the plant manager for the biggest healthcare manufacturing site in the US, and I had 400 employees. So that early experience has helped me in that role as well. So very early on in my career, I've had the opportunity to lead sizable teams of very different experience and expertise within those organizations. So that, I think, has helped me tremendously as I progressed in my career. Now, it's not all good news, because yes, I did go through redundancy while I had 2 little children at home. I did have a time where I felt my career wasn't progressing, particularly as my kids were young. And I wasn't. I felt like I wasn't moving the way I should be, and where I should be going. I've had moments where I thought, I cannot do this. I think I'm gonna throw in the towel. Why am I putting myself through all this? So I think that happens in every career. And those are the moments where it counts, right? It's are you going to persevere? Do you have people who can help you to give you perspective around what you need to address? And you will always find people in your environment who will tell you, yeah, look at what it does to your family, the time that you spend, just cut it out, right? Go do something different. But there are always people in your environment who will be the ones who are saying, no, just don't give up. Like, look at what you've built, and who are willing to support you in those decisions. And it could be mentors, it could be family members. So it's very important at those sort of pivotal points during your career to make those decisions and not to give up, right? And
so who are the ones that really supported you at those times?
Yeah, so my husband, first of all, he's the one that even if I would have just come back from travel and I would have had another customer dinner or something else that was important, and I would be like, oh, I don't want to go now again, he would be the one to say, don't worry, just go. You have to go, do it. Don't hold back, and that helped tremendously. As opposed, he could have said like, "Yeah, just I haven't seen you already for help out here. Don't do it." And then the other person that has been tremendously helpful at a very pivotal point is my mother-in-law, because as I had just moved to Turkey and I was waiting for my work permit to come through after my two kids were born, and I was moving to a GE role in Turkey. Full of doubt whether, coming from my maternity leave, I could start again with two little kids. And my mother-in-law basically told me, she said, I've never had the opportunity, I couldn't finish my school, I'm sick and tired of this kitchen. You have the opportunity to do something, you have something going for you, you go out and do it, and don't worry, we'll help out with the kids. And that for me was a very pivotal moment to continue.
Wonderful. That sounds exactly like what my mother told me as well. Now, any questions from, ladies, any burning questions that, you'd want to hear? Yes.
Thank you so much for your personal and professional story. We just came right over lunch. We had a networking panel, and I wonder, in your career, how much networking actually propel your career?
I am hard-pressed to say that the networking actually propelled the career. I would say that my bosses were very supportive. And while I guess everybody, and I tell my people, right, 1/3 of it is your manager's responsibility, 2/3 is your responsibility to put up your hand, because your boss cannot read your mind as to when it is a good time for you to consider a different role. But for me, I was actually very fortunate that it's always been not my direct boss, but my boss who said, would you consider a move? So while I've done many different roles, I've not made a single request. So I feel like it's very good. Why don't you consider this? Why don't you just move on to do this? And after a while, especially in areas where there's nobody doing it, you're starting with a clean sheet of paper, function doesn't exist, you become the go-to person. Why don't you have built this, why don't you build something else? So it's sort of, you actually have you fill a certain need in the organization. That's how I think of it. And because of that, it opens doors to other opportunities. Because as you sort of become more senior in your role, you have a chance to talk to people outside the organization, and then people welcome you into sort of boards and things like that. That is, to me, the networking effects of the role that I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I look back, networking, as in networking events, I don't think that has been the key driver. Similar to what you're describing, the leaders I've worked for or worked with, or whether I engaged myself in projects where I worked with other functions, that's where the people that I worked with, the people that I met, people who know about what I do and what my capabilities are, that's where job opportunities have come from, right? Because as they move to a different part of the company, they would think about a role or something would come up. I think the one thing that I probably could have done better is keep in touch with the people that I've worked for, because I've worked in many places in the world, even though it's in the same company, people move. So people move to other companies or within the business. And I think I could have done a better job at keeping connected also with the earlier leaders I worked for or mentors, because now I also realize that even though I've worked with very capable people maybe a couple of years ago, it may not be top of mind for me as I'm looking at positions to fill or career opportunities. So it's very important to sort of stay connected, stay on the screen, right? Because there's so many people that you meet throughout your work that you may not always remember everyone that you would want to connect with and that you could actually pull for career opportunities.
I think that internal networking, knowing that people in your organization know what you do, what you're capable of, I would say that's definitely something that's helped. Maybe our industries are different. I wouldn't say it's so much going out there and doing, the different types of the normal kind of networking that people might say, that going out for drinks and stuff. It's been really a lot of internal. Okay, we are really out of time. One last question, yes.
I have a question regarding taking on different roles. You mentioned to me earlier part of your career, you were not afraid to take on opportunities, whether they fitted what you were or what your experiences were, Myra, but you grabbed them and then you figured it out later. And I'll sort of share an example from a function that I come from, as a regional CMO for a financial technology service company, Finastra. I often see people having this bias the moment they sort of read this title, that sort of you're representing marketing or you're a CMO, that probably you're a bit daft and you don't understand business. So often, so earlier we did discuss about not taking your cards when you're networking or sort of talking about the value you bring as a person rather than upfront talking about where you come from or what your title is. But within career advancement, if say somebody who is say within marketing or in HR and they have an aspiration to become a CEO, they may not have the necessary industry knowledge or these sort of functional skill sets. What would your guidance be in sort of getting there if you're not given the opportunities because of those sort of unconscious perceptions and biases that exist?
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about is if you have an aspiration to get into a different function or a different type of experience, is don't wait till you're offered that job. Already engage, right? And it depends a little bit on how open the organization is that you work in allowing you to expand, right? So you first of all have to make sure that you really do well at what your main job is. But as you see that you have capacity, then, and where your interests lie, engage yourself. Can you help out there? Are there fields where you touch on what this function is doing, where you can work actually with your colleagues that are working in this space, and that allows you to learn about what's going on and help the business further, right? Because then all of a sudden people will see a different side of you. And that's where usually these things happen, like, hey, if she can do this well, why couldn't she do a role in, and that's where that helps. So taking that active step yourself, I think, is the first important part.
So we actually think that if you want to get to a C-suite role, runway is important. So people are not going to promote you into this role if it's too late and they can't leverage that. So if you work 5 years back where you need to be, and then another 5 years back where you need to be, that's helpful because it frames your thinking about your choices. The other thing I'll say is DBS is an organization which makes it, which you don't have to actually want to change, but it's a helpful environment where your bosses can't hold you back. So we operate a 2+2 or 3+3 policy. You've been in a role for 2 years, you've done well in your role, your boss has 2 months if you actually want to move and the other unit is prepared to take you. We don't actually allow bosses to hold on to their talent. You can't move, you're too important here, right? And you have done 3 years in a row, you have 3 months, for your bosses to sort of figure out. And because it is an accepted organization culture, people are less afraid of putting up their hands and thinking, oh, I'm not going to get to move, my boss is going to hold me back, I'm not going to advance as much because he thinks I'm not loyal to him. We kind of got rid of a lot of that kind of thinking. We said if our people are not moving at that kind of speed, and we measure, as an organization, we measure how fast is talent mobility, how fast people need to move, then we are not going to see the next generation of leaders coming up the curve. It's as simple as that.
All right, so we've run out. Just a quick summary, I think, from the discussion here, it really sounds like start early. Most of us, I think, start our days at 6 or 6:30, so you need to have enough hours in the day if you want to get the sleep that is also very, very crucial. I think taking care of your health is extremely important because if you're not healthy, you can see that we need to spend a lot of time, whether it's time on the road, time with family, time with responsibilities, so I think taking care of ourselves is important. Picking priorities, be willing to let go of things that may not necessarily, or that might be of lower priority. Learn lots and lots of new things. I think continuous learning is absolutely crucial. Don't be afraid to take on different roles. Exposed to internal networking, make sure people internally know what you are and what you're capable of as opposed to just perceptions around that. And I think continue and have fun. Yeah. So please join me to thank both Sokoy and Myra. Thank you very much.